Hello there, welcome back to the Codex. Today we are going to be going over the Nova changes slash light rework that she received, which is arguably the highlight of this Kome update, which I know is funny since the new frame came out, but these Nova changes are so good. Now I'm not going to be going over every single change listed in the patch notes, but if you want to see those, they're up on the screen right now, so feel free to pause, read over those, etc. whatnot. Now, let's hop into the actual arsenal and take a look at the build here. We'll go over the Archon shards first. I am still using 2 Emerald shards for max corrosive strip via corrosive proc. So these are both non-Tau forges +2. So the two of these together lets me fully strip armor. I would probably actually change this to just using 1 Tau forged shard for a 98% strip, and then put a different shard here, like more power, strength, or duration, etc. I just didn't have the shards at the moment to spare in order to do that, but you can just keep that in mind. Now, these other shards, though, are the ones that I actually plan to keep on here. I'm using 2 Tau Forged ability strength shards. It used to be duration, but we'll talk about why I changed that up now. And I'm also using a Tau Forged casting speed shard, which I do highly recommend. It makes antimatter drop and the molecular prime feel much snappier to use. Now let's hop into the actual build, and we will discuss a few of the fantastic changes they made to her ability. Real rapid fire here. So Null Star, they doubled the base antimatter particle count from 6 to 12. And for those of you that don't know, you get 5% damage reduction per antimatter particle, and the amount of stars that you have, particles that you have, scales with duration. So previously, since it was base 6, that meant that you needed 300% duration to cap this out. You only get 150% now, or actually even less than that, because they also made the 5% damage reduction also now scale with power strength, which is absolutely incredible. So that means that if you are rocking the 150% strength that you need anyway to cap out molecular prime, then you'll be at 7.5% damage reduction per particle. And that means that you could actually have, at just base 100% duration, you could have just barely that 90% damage reduction. So that's really interesting. They also made the ability recastable, which is very convenient. They changed it to blast damage. They doubled its base damage. So a lot of nice changes, even to just this first ability here. The second ability, antimatter drop. Some people are saying that this is nerfed, which is certainly a take of all time. It's much better now, so I don't know what people are talking about. Its radius now scales with range. So you can make this a much larger radius than it usually is, or it used to be, depending on how much range you mod for. They also changed the damage from radiation to blast, and it has 100% blast status chance, which means that it does a better damage type now, honestly. And when enemies are affected by it, they will either detonate after a short delay in a repeated blast proc, or if you kill them with it, they will immediately explode again. So it's now causing even more AoE damage than it used to. So that's fantastic. And arguably, maybe the best change, the quality of life change they gave to it, is that when you throw out your antimatter particle, it will now move slowly to let you shoot it with up to 5 shots to charge it up. But then if you tap it again, it'll fly in the direction that you're looking so that you can instantly make it land, so you no longer have to wait 30 years for it to get to its target, which is amazing and makes it super fun to spam and just keep blowing up rooms. Now, the third ability is Wormhole, which I replaced with Resonator, but the main change that they made to Wormhole is that it's now permanent, it has infinite duration, and it's just purely charge-based. So those portals will last forever just until you go through it enough times to consume all the charges. We replaced it with Resonator, though, which we'll talk about in just a moment here. First, let's talk about Molecular Prime. They changed its base scaling from 30 to 50%, and they made it so that positive power strength is now what scales both slow and speed nova. So there's no longer slow and speed nova, there's just one nova. You don't need negative and positive power strength builds. It's not how it works anymore. You just need 150% strength to cap out that 75% slow and speed, which is a big buff to Nova, by the way, because with the way that Nova used to work, speed actually capped out at 60%. So you can now speed up enemies by 75% instead of 60, which is a huge buff. It's a really good kill rate buff against enemies, especially if you set yourself up in a nice tight corridor or whatnot, depending on the map that you're playing. They also made it so that it's hold cast, like hold/tap, I mean, so you can be both speed and slow nova. If you tap it, it's slow nova, and if you hold cast it, it's speed nova. Although I would highly recommend that you go into your settings and you go to invert hold tap ability and you invert nova. That way, the speed nova, the speed cast will be the tap, which is a lot of the time what you're probably using as nova is you want the speed. So it's better to make that to where you don't have to hold the ability. You can just tap it. Now, the reason I replaced the third ability with Resonator is because it's just a massive survivability increase. The duration it's going to have is going to be incredible because I'm naturally building for high duration due to the fact that that's one of the main stats that Nova wants. And I do have some range on here via overextended, in case you're wondering why am I still running overextended when this gives negative strength and Nova wants strength now. Well, I'm still able to get the 150% strength plus on this build, which we'll talk about in a moment here. But this duration is really nice because it scales up the explosion radius now of antimatter drop, and it's also the charm radius of my Resonator. So those are the two main reasons why I do still want some range in this build. Now, I am still hitting that 150 strength that you need to cap out Molecular Prime because of Molt Augmented, thankfully. So Molt Augmented plus my Archon Shards give me an extra 30%, which is why I'm at 114 right now. Means that after Augmented is stacked up, I'll be at 164%. So I'll be 14% past what I need to stack out Molecular Prime all the way, which is fantastic. I am still using Molecular Fission. Even though they made Nullstar recastable, Molecular Fission will save you the energy of having to manually recast it, and it's also just, it's very convenient to essentially just make your first ability permanent, especially compared to how it used to be. Now that you have so many more Nullstars, Molecular Fission does an even more noticeable job of keeping your stars up. It will actually be like impossible with this mod on if you're killing stuff for you to not be at 90% damage reduction. They also buffed it up to where your Null Stars, when they contact an enemy, they now apply Prime to them, which is super cool. Now, the rest of this build, one of the main changes that I did not mention is that Null Star's 90% damage reduction now also applies to shields. It's not just your health anymore, which means that Primed Redirection plus Arcane Aegis is an incredibly tanky build option for Nova because she has 1,036 shields with Primed Redirection, and shields naturally have 50% damage reduction, which means that even though both her health and shield start at 370, her armor is only 135. You need 300 armor for 50% damage reduction, so her shields actually scale better than her health due to her low armor, and especially, like I said, when you throw in that Arcane Aegis for that super beefed out shield regen. Basically, what this Arcane actually says is that you turn Immortal for 12 seconds when this goes off because of how shield gating works. So it's a fantastic combination. We are still using Narrow-Minded plus Prime Continuity for 254 duration, which gives us a whopping 30 antimatter particles, and we need less than, like, we need like 11 basically to cap out the damage reduction on this build with the amount of power strength that we have. So you'll always have that damage reduction. The reason why I'm using so much excess duration still, at least excess in regards to the first ability, is because Molecular's Prime range still scales with duration, so it's convenient to have a lot of duration for that, so it travels a really far away, hitting a ton of enemies, and you don't have to spam recasting it as often. Now, Equilibrium is on here. Equilibrium paired with Prime Flow, especially given the fact that most of us are probably running Panzers now, is going to be a really great source of energy income. So that's why I'm using that. And then Umbral Intensify is just a little bit of strength, of course, to make sure that we're easily hitting that 150% that we need for the fourth ability. Let's hop into a mission here and see how this incredibly amazing Nova rework has changed the game, basically. All right, let's hop into let's do a Kuva Fortress Survival because the maps are nice and tight there, and I'll show you how crazy antimatter drop is, for example. Alright, so here we are at the Kuva Fortress. Make sure you put your first ability on right away, of course. Pop that third ability as well, Resonator. That'll give you a ton of tankiness by way of just essentially not getting shot in the first place. By everyone except Eximus. I will point that out. Eximus are immune to that charm. So the only enemies that'll really be shooting at you, close to you at least, will be Eximus. So out those guys first. Now, one of the main reasons why people are saying antimatter drop is nerfed is because it now requires a line of sight check. But my rebuttal to that is aim the ability. That's about it. Yeah. The line of sight check is from the perspective of the ability, by the way. So it doesn't matter if you can't see around the doorway, as long as wherever the antimatter drop lands can see. If it can draw a line from itself to any part of the enemy, it will hit them. That's how that line of sight check works. So you can hit guys that you can't see as long as it can see it. Like, for example, you see there was guys up on that platform there that I can't see from my perspective, but since it exploded over here, it was able to draw a line of sight check to that enemy and kill them. So depending on your map setup, you can still very easily kill dozens of people with a single cast of this. And it's extremely potent now that it has a blast damage type with that guaranteed status chance. That's fantastic damage. You can see Equilibrium is really helping to keep my energy up here, especially now that you are heavily incentivized to be spamming that antimatter drop a lot. You really want that constant energy influx. At least in my opinion, because I really like this ability now. So I'm going to be using it quite a bit, and I don't have any ability efficiency on. You can see I'm stacking up my strength bonus here, so I'm just about at the cap. Yeah, I should be there now, 75%. So now I'm speeding enemies up by, again, 75% as opposed to the old 60% max. So these guys are really zooming around. Typically, that would make this build very dangerous because you speed up everything that they do by 75%. They shoot faster, they melee faster, and they move faster. They do everything faster, including their DPS. But since I have Resonator out, basically the only enemies that can actually hit me are Eximus. So this build is incredibly safe. Now, I was just literally standing still there for a moment, and I started to take some damage, but that's obviously not a realistic scenario. Typically, you're not going to just sit there and let them hit you. So as long as you're constantly killing, and you're keeping that Resonator up, you'll be very tanky paired with that Prime Redirection plus Arcane Aegis combo. You can make this even tankier by fitting Adaptation into the build somehow, because Adaptation also applies its 90% damage reduction, or up to 90% damage reduction to shields. So you can stack all of that on top. Or you could use something like Mirage's Eclipse, for example, and give yourself another 75% damage reduction. There's plenty of options. But yeah, as you can see, the effectiveness of Nova and the quality of life, the utility, everything about Nova is just so much better now. I mean, she is really, like, just a perfect Warframe now. If you don't already have her, or if you do have her and you just haven't really played around with her a whole lot before, it's time to dust her off. You need to pull her out. She's incredible. I mean, look at this. The survivability, the damage, how widespread that damage is. She is just so good. And your teammates will love you. Assuming that, you know, you're doing the kind of mission where you want to have a Nova, which is most of them. To be fair, like 99% of Warframe missions, the objective is fucking kill everything, and Nova's really good at that. I will wait until an Acolyte spawns in here before we dip out, but one note about the weapon choice that I'm using. I am using the Tenet Archiplasmor. I like this on Nova because while I'm charging up the orb, I can sometimes also shoot past the orb where I'm aiming and get basically some free damage initial hits on from the Plasmor on the enemies that are directly behind it, since it has that punch through. Sometimes the orb will absorb all of the hit, and that won't happen, but whenever it does go through, it's like some free extra damage, essentially, which is pretty nice. And then the antimatter drop will finish them off, of course. But yeah, zero issues keeping up energy, as you can see, thanks to Equilibrium plus my Panzer Vulpaphyla feeding all the health orbs I need to get converted. Looks like we have an Acolyte coming in here. The second ability probably won't be fantastic against Acolytes, but we can test it out. Yeah, not amazing, so you probably just want to use your weapon. So I'll just spam him with my my Plasmor here and my Zors. There we go. He's done for. Now I'll show you. Actually, let me recast Molecular Prime. I'll show you how, if you hold cast, like I said, you can change the type. And for me, hold casting, I switched to slow. So now you can see they're slowed down. So it's really nice that you have the convenience of choosing whether or not you want to be a speed or a slow Nova. And I will point out, one quality of life change that this, well, quality of life change also affected is that since Nova is now all positive strength, like there's no negative strength build, that means that Nova is no longer nerfed in Fisher missions whenever she gets the power strength corruption. That was something that always annoyed me, where getting double power strength on a speed Nova is like the only frame in the game where you didn't want more power strength. Super annoying. Now if you get that double power strength, it either just doesn't matter, it's just neutral, or it's actually a good thing, depending on your build. For example, if you were using like a Roar helmet to make your antimatter drop do crazy amounts of extra damage, then you'd be like, oh great, now I'm actually doing more damage. This is fantastic. So it's all upsides. But yeah, that's Nova, guys. She's fantastic. This new skin is absolutely amazing. All 4 of her abilities got super giga buffed, and she is super fun to play as. So I'm going to keep murdering these guys here. You guys can let me know down in the comments what you think. If you liked the video, consider subbing, consider liking. It helps a ton, helps me get out there to more people. And yeah, it's been a fun time, guys. I'm going to keep murdering these guys and stacking up some Kuva, and I'll see you guys in the next one.